The silence hung over the Tower of London, interrupted only by the cold whisper of the wind weaving through the ancient stones. In the center of the courtyard, a dark-eyed woman with a regal posture knelt before the scaffold. Her scarlet dress contrasted with the pale rigidity of her face, but her expression was not one of fear. It was one of dignity. Around her, courtiers and soldiers watched with a mix of horror and fascination. The executioner's blade glimmered in the morning light. And then, in one cruel instant, it was all over. How could a woman who had won the heart of a king and changed the course of a kingdom meet such an end? Anne Boleyn was no mere lady-in-waiting. She defied traditions, faced an empire, and rewrote the fate of England. But in a game of power where alliances were as fragile as promises, her meteoric rise was followed by an even more brutal fall. What led Anne to the throne? And, more importantly, what led to her downfall? 16th century England was a silent battlefield, where the whispers of palace corridors were as lethal as the swords of soldiers. King Henry VIII, powerful and impatient, longed for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, could no longer bear children. But a young noblewoman, sharp-minded and ambitious, was about to turn the English monarchy upside down. And Boleyn was not just beautiful. Her magnetism went beyond physical appearance. Fluent in multiple languages, educated in the most refined courts of Europe, she mastered the art of conversation and persuasion. Her independent spirit and keen wit quickly caught the king's attention. But unlike many others who succumbed to Henry's power and refused to be just another mistress, she wanted more, and she knew that to have more, she had to play the game wisely. Thus began the greatest scandal in England. The king, obsessed with and would defy the church, break a decades-long marriage, and transform the kingdom forever. But behind the seduction and glory, the seeds of tragedy had already been sown. Long before she became the central figure in one of the greatest scandals in English history, Anne Boleyn was just a girl born into an ambitious family. The daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a shrewd diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, a noble descendant, and received an education few women of her time could dream of. From an early age, her life was intertwined with the great courts of Europe, where she learned the refinements of etiquette, the art of persuasion, and the secrets of politics. In France, where she spent much of her youth, and absorbed the Renaissance culture, becoming a sophisticated and spirited woman. Unlike many English ladies raised to be discreet and submissive, and spoke openly, possessed a sharp mind, and exuded a charm that captivated everyone. She was not the most conventionally beautiful woman at court, but her intelligence and mystery made her irresistible. When she returned to England, her reputation preceded her. Soon, she found her place in the court of Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's wife. But young and would not remain just another royal servant. Her destiny, driven by ambition and circumstance, would place her at the center of a whirlwind that would change the history of the English monarchy. Henry VIII was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. When his eyes fell upon Anne Boleyn, he saw more than a beautiful lady-in-waiting. He saw a challenge. Unlike her sister, Mary Boleyn, who had been the king's mistress and was quickly discarded, and did not surrender. She knew that to stay in the game, she had to dictate the rules. Enchanted, Henry began courting her with passionate letters and grand promises. But Anne remained firm. If he wanted to have her, the king would have to do the unthinkable, make her his wife. This dangerous game only fueled the monarch's obsession, and he began to see Catherine of Aragon as an obstacle to be removed. However, divorce was not just a personal decision. It was a political and religious matter. The Catholic Church would not allow a king to simply annul a marriage recognized by the Pope. Thus, Henry's passion for and quickly turned into a war against Rome. Bishops, ambassadors, and even the Pope himself became involved in the dispute, while Anne watched from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to claim her crown. But in defying the Church and destabilizing an empire, and did not realize that she was also creating the very enemies who would one day destroy her. The wait was long, but Anne Boleyn triumphed. After years of conflict with the Catholic Church, Henry VIII definitively broke with Rome, declaring himself the supreme head of the newly formed Church of England. Catherine of Aragon was banished from court, and in January 1533, Anne and Henry secretly married. A few months later, she was crowned Queen of England in an unprecedented ceremony. No other consort had received such an honor. At that moment, Anne was at the peak of her power. But the throne, which seemed her greatest triumph, would also become her greatest curse. The pressure to produce a male heir was overwhelming. Henry had defied the world to make her his queen, and she needed to repay him with a prince. In September 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. The king concealed his disappointment, but it was clear that his patience was not infinite. At court, many still saw Catherine as the rightful queen, and faced growing resistance. Her enemies were everywhere: discontented nobles, clergy loyal to Rome, and even former allies who began to doubt her influence. She was still the king's wife, but the same power that had lifted her to the throne was now subtly pushing her to the edge of the abyss. Queen Anne Boleyn, who once reigned with arrogance and confidence, began to feel the shadow of fear creeping in. Henry VIII, once ardent and passionate, grew colder and more impatient. The birth of Elizabeth, instead of securing her position, only highlighted her failure to provide the long-awaited male heir. The following months brought miscarriages and broken promises. The disillusioned king began listening to his advisors, who whispered that Anne would never give him a son. Among them was Thomas Cromwell, once her ally, now a silent threat. As Anne struggled to maintain her influence, a new woman emerged at court, Jane Seymour. Submissive and demure, she was the exact opposite of the tempestuous queen. In her, Henry found what he had long ceased to see in Anne: obedience and compliance. The game had changed. The same court that once exalted and now conspired against her. Rumors circulated, insinuating infidelity and adultery. Anne, who had risen so quickly, did not realize that her empire of power was crumbling. Her fate was sealed. She just didn't know the final blow would come sooner than expected. Anne Boleyn's fall was swift and ruthless. Those who had once schemed to elevate her now worked to bring her down. Thomas Cromwell, realizing that and no longer served his political plans, orchestrated her ruin. Rumors spread through the court. It was said that Anne had been unfaithful to the king, that she had taken lovers within the palace, and even that she had seduced her own brother, George Boleyn, in an incestuous act to conceive an heir. Henry VIII, who had once defied the world for Anne, did not hesitate to believe the accusations. Perhaps out of convenience, perhaps because he already longed for a new wife. In May 1536, Anne was arrested and taken to the Tower of London. Once the most powerful woman in England, she was now surrounded by cold walls and silent betrayals. Her trial was a public spectacle. Judges loyal to the king declared her guilty of adultery, treason, and incest. The verdict was inevitable: death. The king, in his generosity, granted her an unusual privilege. Instead of the gallows, she would be executed by a French swordsman, ensuring a quick and less painful death. On the morning of May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn walked to the scaffold. The sky was clear, and a heavy silence enveloped the Tower of London. Her blood was spilled, but her legacy never faded. Now tell me, was Anne Boleyn a victim of conspiracy or of her own ambition? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it so more people can discover this fascinating story. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes of history's greatest sagas. See you in the next video. Legends never die. They are told.